Returning to Islamic aesthetics, the example that we have right now, which is figure 211 from O'Reilly, it's a page from the Quran, and it is also an example of writing as the highest art form. Writing existed on the Arabian Peninsula in the 6th century, but it was at that point mostly used for business transactions. However, it is going to blossom, especially during the golden age of Islam, and become the most important avenue of artistic expression. In fact, as O'Reilly points out for us, it's probably best to start referring to this as calligraphy. Calligraphy as a major art form, the name calligraphy, actually derives from Greek roots, kalos for beautiful and graphos for writing. And I think beautiful writing would be appropriate as a description for this particular object. This is Surah 18. That's again, Surah is one of the chapters that we can find in the Quran. It's called the cave. That's a translation. Uh, Muslims know their surahs or their chapters by names rather than by numbers, and they tend to pick part of what is described within the surah as a designation for that particular chapter. And in this case, there is a story inside the surah that deals with individuals who were being persecuted, who go into a cave and who are protected in the cave. It becomes a refuge for them. They actually go in with their dog. They fall asleep, and when they awake, the danger has passed. There is a parallel in a Christian story that is very similar, but basically it is about the protection of God or Allah. This is a page that was created in ink and gold. So you're looking at a gold leaf that is at the top portion of the calligraphy. And it is on vellum. Vellum is animal skin. So what we're talking about here is high-end materials that are appropriate to the subject that is being depicted in written form, the word of Allah. There are different styles of calligraphy or of writing in the Muslim world. And among the choices, one of the most important for scholars and for students would be Kufic. And this would be an example of Kufic. It is the earliest script that was produced, and it's pretty easy to recognize because the writing is very, very angular. And the reason for that, we think, is that it was originally used in carving writing on stone monuments, which of course is just going to make it easier if you create angular letters. So deriving from stone carving, taking it over to working with ink, we end up with pretty strong, if we're going right here, pretty strong 90-degree angles or angular forms. In addition to that, there tend to be thick letters and rounded curves. There's also the tendency to protract the written form, the word, or perhaps the letter across the page in a decorative way. That has occurred in this particular example. Returning to Islamic aesthetics, there are other elements that are important elements of design, including, of course, abstraction, but also balance and symmetry and rhythm. And I think most of all, a pleasing placement against the background. And those qualities definitely apply to this passage from the Surah, the cave. What we have here are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This would be 1. And we do start from the right and we go to the left to read. We have 5 lines of text, and then we have the surah heading up above with a finial, an ending piece. And that ending piece is located right here. It is often, this particular shape is often referred to as a kind of palmette or a vegetative-like form or a palm leaf-like form. It definitely has plant-like designs at its base, and they would be down here. In other words, I'm suggesting we have a decorative element that neatly falls into the domain of abstraction. And then we have the title of the surah written in, I'm going to call this the header, that kind of sets us up to know what it is that we are looking at. This is also very clearly balanced. It has an element of symmetry. It has a rhythmic quality, repeated shapes, repeated forms, and above all, I think it has a pleasing placement on the page. One of the things that you might initially notice is that the borders are justified. They follow a straight edge. That would be true over here, and it would also be true over here. There's also a wider margin on the right side. And the reason for that is the artist who laid this out is using it to fill the space with the palmette, with this large plume-like design over here. So it's kind of compensating and balancing, placing the weight of the written portion of this in harmony with the extension of the palmette. So using empty space as a portion of the page for purposes of balance and creating order and harmony. The artist is also stressing the horizontal of the page. And he's doing that by protracting the words. And that would be probably most obvious right here, but it occurs in other cases in the text as well, such as here and also over here, so that there is an emphasis and a repeated emphasis on the horizontal. So we have a sense of order and balance on this page, carefully laid on the vellum, the text itself. We have fairly well-defined and equal spacing between the lines so that it meets, I think, the standards of aesthetics for page placement, for balance, for harmony. There's also rhythmic quality. There's a repetition of similar forms and shapes. And if we look at this in English, I guess we could call this a J shape. You can see that it is frequently repeated throughout the written forms on the page. And it echoes some of the images along the bottom line as well. There's one last thing. Despite all of these fine features, those of you who might in fact be able to read Arabic would probably have a tough time doing so with this text because the letters themselves are so highly abstracted into artistic shapes and forms. This is a fairly early Quran from the 9th to the 10th centuries. And in this early period of Islamic history, more or less the people who were consulting Qurans already had memorized the text. They were using these pages as they perhaps led a group in prayer as a mnemonic device, just to be sure that everything was in order and they remembered all of the passages, you know, what was coming next. But it wasn't really necessary to actually read the specific lines. So the lines themselves, the calligraphy itself is actually abstracted too. Abstraction, of course, can also be applied to life forms, human as well as animal, and that allows some flexibility for artists to actually create living beings. This is just one sample to quickly look at. I like it because it's located in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in the relatively recently rehabbed section of Art of the Muslim World in the Met. If you get a chance, you should go and look at it because it's pretty well done. This is a lion. You can tell that it's a cat-like creature, but you can also see that it's highly abstracted. It's also a utilitarian object. It's an incense burner. And you can see right here the head of our lion as it's been removed from the body. The incense itself could be placed in on the interior of the body, and you can see that the sides of the animal are perforated so that the incense could actually come out. You can also clearly see that it's a pretty abstracted creature. The whiskers of our kitty cat, as well as the ears, are very simplified. They are repeated in shape and form, particularly the whiskers. You can see a series of lines coming up one after the other. There's a quality of rhythm, there's a quality of repetition, but also certainly more than anything of abstraction. This allows the object to be used, to be made, because the artist is not attempting to take away or to usurp or to perhaps challenge the powers of creation belonging alone to Allah. I'd also like you to see that even on this, there is writing. Writing can go on everything. There is a band in particular, I think that's visible and easy to see, that runs around the base, the neck of the incense, the head of the lion and the incense burner. And that is an inscription that the artist has made in dedication to his patron, who is a member, essentially a prince, a member of the royal court. And fundamentally, he's sucking up to his boss, but perhaps a universal characteristic. But it is writing that has been blended into the abstract decoration on the surface of the object. This also, of course, is a fairly symmetrical and balanced presentation of a lion. Since Islamic artists rely on abstraction so much, they have created abstract patterns and designs based upon foliage and plant forms. These are acceptable and they're also really beautiful and they become incredibly complex. You're looking at what Mr. O'Reilly is going to be referring to as arabesque and interlace in both of my examples that are on the screen. That would be the image top left and top right. Okay, an arabesque, and again, this is a Western designation, is an abstract design that basically suggests a plant form or foliage or particularly perhaps vines that are twining and interlacing. And you can see some of those vines down here. This is a carpet I'm going to say something about in a second. So the arabesque may in fact run into and become interlace as well. And in the upper left corner, I am hoping that you can pick up some of the floral shapes here, the floral shape here, and I'm going to call that a leaf. These two would be very abstracted, very symmetrical. And they also can clearly incorporate geometric shapes and forms. If you go to the very center of this, you're going to find should be an eight pointed star, which is one of the traditional designs within Islam. Similarly, if you look at the carpet, which is on our right, you're going to see the medallion shape. Again, a common feature of Islamic design, particularly for carpets, that's located in the center. In both of these, it should remind you of the importance of symmetry and harmony and balance within Islamic aesthetics. The carpet that we're looking at is figure 222 in our textbook. It's one of two versions of a very famous carpet, the most famous in London, and it is called the Ardabil carpet. It's famous for having somewhere between 25 and 26 million knots that make up the fabric of the carpet. It is over 35 feet long, and it is a particularly finely crafted carpet with the sunburst medallion located in the center, and then two mosque lamps, one here and one here at both ends of its design. Its original location was the floor of a mosque. Given that it is 35 feet in length, perhaps we can understand why the mosque lamps, which are part of the decoration, are of two different sizes. This one is smaller than this one. As you enter and come in and begin to walk across the carpet, perspective would allow you to view the mosque lamps as exactly the same size, thus maintaining symmetry, order, and balance. Please note the detail right here, which comes from this portion of the carpet. It is a poem. so that we should be aware that writing can be incorporated into everything as a portion of the decoration or the design. Words are everywhere.